Yeah, you keep talking, buddy, and then we're gonna find out just how flammable a butthole really is. What's good, y'all? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. So, during this little downtime era, it was kind of inevitable that we were gonna have another conversation about the Gen 5 remakes. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that at minimum, we are still about like 3, 4, possibly even 5 years away from those remakes. So, yeah, it's probably a little too soon to be talking about them. However, there's been one thing that's been on my mind in regards to these remakes that I can't really ignore, and that is, should the Gen 5 remakes have some form of gimmick? Gimmicks have been a primary aspect of mainline Pokemon games for at least a decade and a half now. So there's absolutely no way we're gonna sit here and ignore that very real possibility. And of course, once again, as I always say, it's not like every single Pokemon game needs to have a gimmick, but personally, I do feel like they can definitely help, especially in very certain situations like this one. So with that, I think we should probably just go ahead and get into it, right? I assume that nail is in the wall because you already know the drill by now. Why don't you go ahead, sit down with a nice cool glass of water, and you know what, get yourself a nice hearty lunch, possibly dinner if it's that time for you. Grab a bucket of pasta, make sure to butter it up, and just slather it, absolutely dazzle it in maple syrup, while we talk about the possibility of the Gen 5 remakes having some form of gimmick. I feel like the first thing we should probably do is take a step back and look at the Gen 4 remakes, because that's what made me consider the possibility in the first place. Even with Generation 4 still being one of my personal favorites, I think I could speak for a good majority of us when I say that the Gen 4 remakes were some of the biggest disappointments in recent years when it comes to the Pokemon franchise. And that's kind of saying a lot considering the fact that it came after Pokemon Sword and Shield. People definitely have a lot of complaints and issues when it comes to Pokemon Sword and Shield, and I can't necessarily disagree with a lot of them because they're kind of valid. But the one thing you can argue is that at the very least, it was a new game that we paid for. This was very much not the case for the remakes. Now, we could go on and on and on about all the problems that we had with this game, but we've already done that for the last couple years now. One of the biggest problems, though, that definitely stood out was that there were absolutely no changes to the gameplay, which was very strange. Why is it that the Gen 3 remakes got a fresh new coat of paint and the added on feature of Mega Evolution so that they could have a unique change to the gameplay style? Why is it that Gen 4 got almost nothing in that regard? I think a lot of people can agree when I say that I don't think that we want to pay full price for the exact same game anymore unless it has changes that at least make it some form of worth it. In the case of the Gen 4 remakes, if it actually came out the way that it was supposed to with the graphical style of Pokemon Legends Arceus and it was an actual full-scale grand-ass remake, then yeah, that would have been one thing I feel like the general populace opinion would have changed drastically. But all these told us was that we may as well have been playing Pokemon Platinum. Super unfortunate. The worst part about all of this, though, is that those remakes made an absurd amount of money. So, the reality in which we do actually get the top-down 2D style Gen 5 remakes is a very real one. Now, of course, that's not what I want, but if that's something that we have to receive, if that's something that's just already finalized, there's no changing their minds on it, then I think at the very least, the one thing that could make it worth it is if we at least had a gimmick that could make a change to the gameplay aspect. If we're going to be getting the exact same story in the exact same style, just on the big screen with like a nice glaze over it, then at the very least, give us changes to the gameplay. Give us something that makes the overall playthrough a little different. So, with that in our minds, we have to ask, what would the gimmick be if we were to do something like that? The one thing that we can be completely sure of is that a remake isn't gonna introduce its own unique, completely brand new gimmick. Which means there's a handful of gimmicks that we already know good and well by now that could be a real possibility for these remakes. The question on my mind is which one they're most likely to use. In your opinion, which of the gimmicks that we know of now would be the most fitting for the Gen 5 remakes? Why don't we go ahead and go from least likely to most likely? Starting with style changes. Now, as much as I would love to see this gimmick properly utilized and balanced in a true mainline game, there's no chance in hell that it's coming back to the remakes of all things. Sure, they could possibly make it aesthetically fit, but I don't know, it just doesn't seem like the right fit generally speaking, and I can't see them even bringing it back in general. Again, I would love to see it, but I don't see it being here. I feel like that's a mechanic that works more with the more free-flowing battle style of the Legends games. Those games are meant to be quicker paced, your turns are meant to be fiddled with depending on whether or not you're utilizing style changes and things like that, but in a mainline game that's heavily utilizing things like stats and stuff like that, it has to be so heavily modified that it simply just doesn't feel like it would work here. And even if it could possibly work, Game Freak is not going out of their way to do something like that. Not for the remakes. Now, outside of that, we have our other 4 main gimmicks. However, it's very obvious and safe to say that Dynamaxing, Gigantamaxing, and Z-moves are gimmicks that are never coming back. To make it so that their stories work, they had to create very specific lore purposes so that we could have something like Dynamaxing, Gigantamaxing, and Z-moves in those respective regions. So, unless we end up going back to those respective regions in Legends titles, which probably won't happen for a frickin' millennia, I don't see those gimmicks coming to something like a remake. Obviously, Unova was not built with these gimmicks in mind whatsoever. So, in the specific case of Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing, unless they decide to lock in and go out of their way to make it so that for lore purposes, it is able to happen in Unova, but not only that, they make it so that they have these big, spacious arenas for these giant Pokemon to fit in and battle in, I don't really see something like that happening. I don't think it would work. Z-moves are probably a bit more flexible, but I don't see Necrozma going out of its way to make and create Z-crystals for the Pokemon that are living in Unova, because why would it go there? I don't know. I don't really see a logical explanation for how that could happen unless somebody forcibly brought it there, which isn't impossible, especially because that's exactly what might happen. We'll get to that. Of course, I wouldn't be mad at all if we decided to pay another visit to Z-moves for whatever reason. It's been a long time since we've seen them, so why the hell not? But aesthetically and logically, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense for it to end up in Unova, so I just can't really see that happening for the remakes. Now, if we're talking about actual, genuine, realistic possibilities, Mega Evolution seems right up there. Lore-wise, it's the most flexible, it's a lot of people's favorite, so it's definitely something that's gonna garner a lot of attention and hype for the game. And on top of that, all you have to do is give us a couple of new Mega Evolutions for the Unova Pokemon, and you've got a very solid game on your hands. Mega Evolution is, by and far, Pokemon Company and Game Freak's biggest crutch. It's been available in 6th gen, the 3rd gen remakes, 7th gen, twice, and Pokemon Let's Go. And that's not even mentioning the fact that Pokemon Legends ZA is utilizing Mega Evolutions, which means we have seen it for over 5 major titles. It is, by and far, the easiest and most simple change they can add to a game, and basically just profit. Now, as obvious and as flexible as Mega Evolution is, I don't think that's what they would use. Earlier in the video, I did say that we probably are quite a ways off from the remakes, but even then, I feel like it would be a little too soon to see it again, especially right after Legends ZA. Think about it like this. The last time I think we saw Mega Evolution was in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee when it comes to mainline games. The only reason we're getting it back now is literally because we are going back to Kalos, where Mega Evolution originated in the first place. It's very clear that they've been trying to inch away from utilizing it as a crutch like they have been. This just so happens to be a very special case, something that we probably won't see for another couple of years. So again, because we're seeing it in Legends ZA this year, I think it would be way too soon if we saw it in the Gen 5 remakes only a couple of years later. Like what? Maybe 2 or 3 years down the line. Not impossible, but just a little more unlikely. But hey, you know what? It's a lot closer than all the other ones beforehand that we've talked about. And you know, of all the things to get announced with the Gen 5 remakes, if we just so happen to find out that Mega Evolution does happen to be the gimmick for the remakes, I feel like a lot less people would be mad about that as opposed to absolutely having nothing for a game that we've known for way too long now. A generally new and fresh way to experience Gen 5. I'm not gonna sit here and cry about it. It's something. And then lastly, of course, if you've been following me or just been generally following Pokemon, it's very obvious what I'm going to say next. But weirdly enough, argue with me all you want, but terestalization seems kind of possible and kind of likely. Okay, maybe likely is too strong of a word, but definitely a lot more likely than anything that I've mentioned prior. The simple reason being, the DLC for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Miss Briar, the original chaperone for the first DLC, made it very clear that she was doing something to possibly bring terestalization to Blueberry Academy. And I forgot how, I'll be honest, but long story short, she good and well did that. However, one of the most critical, subtle, and mostly unnecessary facts about this is the fact that Blueberry Academy is based in the oceans of Unova. Blueberry Academy is in Unova. Terestalization is canonically already in Unova. The funny thing about that is, there was no reason to ever mention that Blueberry Academy is in Unova. Did not need to bring that up at all. Could have gone the entire DLC without knowing that. Such an unnecessary fact seems intentional when you think about it like that, right? What other reason could they possibly have to make sure that we know as the player that this academy that just got terestalization is in Unova, other than, hey, Unova and terestalization now go hand in hand in your mind because it's here, so hey, 5th gen remakes was, I don't say I'm reaching. I really don't care. The point is that it's kind of possible. And honestly, as a gimmick, I think terestalization is easily one of the better ones and also one of the more flexible ones as well. I could definitely see a situation in which terestalization could easily be the next, like, low-key crutch. I hate to put it that way, but I feel like it kind of works, right? Because of how flexible it is as a mechanic. There should be no reason as to why we only use it for one game. So in this situation, I feel the exact same way as I do about terestalization as I do for Mega Evolution. If it gives us a new, fresh way to play through Generation 5, then hey, I'm all for it. Being able to change your Pokemon's typing at any given moment during a battle and your opponent having the exact same power is a fun strat to utilize. I think it's a good tactic, and I think that would be really fun to play around with through the story of Generation 5. I don't know, I could definitely see terestalization being something that we utilize for that game, but there is one other thing, one other possibility that we have yet to mention, and that is the possibility of a new gimmick. To make this clear, I have no doubt in my mind that Generation 10 is going to introduce yet another completely fresh, brand new gimmick. I could not begin to even guess what the gimmick could possibly be, whether it be Pokemon Fusion or Move Type Fusion or dual moves or some other crazy 5th thing. I don't even know. But they're coming up with something. They're cooking for sure. We just don't know what kind of gas they're using. It could be ass gas. I don't know. But the point is, they're making something. I think a lot of us can agree that it's very likely, or at least more likely, that Generation 5 remakes are going to come out after Generation 10. Makes sense, that's kind of how it's always worked at this point. So, if Gen 5 remakes aren't already in development, depending on how popular and how flexible this new gimmick that we get is, it's very possible that the Gen 5 remakes could just ride off the successful coattail of that and just utilize that gimmick there. So, I guess when you boil it down to the nitty-gritty, I feel like it's more likely to either be between terestalization or whatever brand new gimmick we get introduced to when we eventually get Generation 10, but who knows how far off that is. So, with all that being said, let's finally answer the question, should Gen 5 remakes have a gimmick? My vote, definitely leaning heavily towards yes. Of course, again, if done right and we get true, actual, genuine, from the ground up remakes that don't even look similar to the originals, then you know what? Maybe we could get away with not having gimmicks. Maybe we just play a fun, fresh, beautiful looking version of the Unova remakes. However, and I pray that I'm wrong, I get the gut feeling that we're not getting anything remotely close to something like that. So, if we're gonna be generally experiencing the same game that we played back in 2011, then I want two things. I want a gimmick so that the gameplay feels different, and I want a surplus of Pokemon from future generations to be available in the grass in this game so that I could use a more unique team. This should absolutely apply to pretty much every trainer in the game, by the way, just putting that out there. We kind of live in a very unfortunate age of creative bankruptcy when it comes to video games for whatever reason. When it comes to things like remakes and remasters and yada yada yada, yeah, we can get the game back, but if we're paying full price for a game that we just wanted available to us in a modern format, that's not gonna make a consumer happy at this point. Not anymore. Things are way too expensive for me to be spending $60 full on a game I played 12 plus years ago. We need a couple of changes to at least help justify that purchase. But of course, that falls to them. They could just as easily make the exact same game all over again, just like they did with the 4th gen remakes, make a quick buck, and call it a day. And as unfortunate as that reality is, it's a very real reality that we live in, because they make the games, we don't. And we have absolutely no say, because the internet is not a real place. But you know what? Doesn't matter, because hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that just about does it for this one. I may have done something very similar in the past before, and I'm sorry if I have. I don't remember. I truly don't at this point. It's been a while since we've talked about Gen 5 anything for a while now, but you know, I figured it was a better time than ever to do so. But you know, we've got a lot of conversations to have about plenty of other things, and then I've got a couple things to work on before we hit the big milestone, so keep your eyes out if you haven't been. But with all that being said, I'm passing the mic over to you guys, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree that we absolutely do need a gimmick for the 5th gen remakes? We do need to have some kind of major change to justify this game being existing for us, make it so that the purchase that we make is justified, so that we could have a new experience, a fresh experience in Unova with these changes? Or are you opposed to it? You don't think that the games need a gimmick whatsoever? We could have plain Jane Pokemon as long as they do it properly and, you know, actually remake the game and make it look pretty. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I am always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, yes, sir, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone, so thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor, taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!